Thank you for tuning in today to I Retire for Him, the voice and resource of the Retirement Reformation, online at retirementreformation.org. Did you know that when you retire, your calling doesn't retire? Your calling is a lifetime calling, and if you're still around, God isn't done with you yet. As a retired person, you are a fully funded missionary for the rest of your life. You've tuned into I Retire for Him, the voice and resource of the Retirement Reformation, with Bruce Brynsma, the founder of the Retirement Reformation. I'm your host, Jim Brangenberg. Check us out online at retirementreformation.org and on Facebook, Retirement Reformation. You know, it's amazing, but almost every Christian I know thinks that ministry has to be formal, organized by some organization. Very few retired folks I know, and I know a ton of them, realize the significance of the ministry they have been handed right in their neighborhood, right where they live. Your neighbors were placed there by God for you to be a living, breathing Jesus to them. And today we're going to talk about ways to do that. Bruce, living up there in the mountains on those 5-acre lots, do you ever get a chance to interact with your neighbors?
You know, it's really hard with our neighbors here. There are a lot of busy folks that are doing things, and so frankly, I'm a little disappointed that we haven't been able to interact more with our neighbors here. We act more with our neighbors that live a little bit distance from us, so you wouldn't really call them neighbors in the sense of geography, but neighbors in the sense of the way Jesus meant neighbors, absolutely.
Well, and it is tough when you live in those neighborhoods where you have big yards and you live on the side of a mountain. So, I mean, it's like a hike to go to your neighbors. But I wanted to draw attention, as part of this neighboring series, we're going to do a 2-part series on neighboring. I want to draw attention to a couple of points to the manifesto. But why don't you tell people, why do you have a Retirement Reformation manifesto in the first place?
Well, you know, when there's an area of need and an area of opportunity that extends for all of us, that when we hit retirement and before, but where in fact we can make a difference. Often we don't have any guidelines, we don't have any suggestions, any ways to be able to step into that stage of life. And so the manifesto is kind of like an outline. It was a little bit like the Israelites who were lost, having just left. All they knew was 400 years of what was going on in the country where God had placed them before, in Egypt. Now they're in the desert and they're lost and they're not quite sure what to do. So they need some guidelines, some suggestions, some areas of what our priorities ought to be. And so the manifesto provides that for us. And when we read it, each time it's kind of, interestingly enough, it's kind of a little bit like reading the Bible. Every time you read a section, you say, gee, I don't remember reading that before, or it strikes you with a learning experience in a whole new way. So the manifesto has an ongoing, living, breathing kind of role for those of us that are, say, 60 and older, to refer to and to be challenged by, and then to receive some guidance.
And we encourage you to go on to retirementreformation.org and click on the manifesto tab and sign the manifesto. But today I want to highlight, Bruce, 2 points from the manifesto, number 1 and number 4. Number 1, it says freedom. We live for more than our culture's definition and expectations of retirement. Reforming retirement requires a reframing of our thinking, allowing us to shine a light into the purposeless retirement void and finding freedom from unending leisure, indulgence, and self-gratification. And I'm going to read number 4 in the third segment of the show. But, you know, Bruce, I spent 20 years living in what I call retirement purgatory, a homeowners association in Florida. And I saw the misery of people living only for pleasure, only for tennis or golf or seashell hunting, only for the potlucks at the country club. I mean, it was a little rough. But where we live in retirement makes a huge difference. You and Judy have decided to stay in Colorado, where you've lived a number of years already. A lot of people are going, hey, we're retiring. Should we move south? What do you think?
Well, I think the reality is that with the proper understanding that you can bloom where you're planted. You can also be challenged and find new inspiration by changing your environment and changing your friends. And so it's not a question of where you live, but what do you do when you live where you live?
Right. Yeah.
Now, Judy's always cold. She's pretty skinny. And,
she is
so
pretty
she's
skinny.
always cold. So she really appreciates it when we go to some place that's warm. And whether it be for a week to Costa Rica or 10 days, or whether it goes to Palm Springs or whatever it may be. So in the winter, we do tend to travel to places where it's warm. And so the key is, however, not where you live or where you go, but it's the attitude that you bring as you go wherever that is.
You know what I found, Bruce, in Florida, my neighbors, they all moved south because they thought, well, everybody moves south, it's warm, no, I don't have to shovel snow anymore. But what they realized is that they moved away from everything they knew to a place where they didn't know anybody, and they missed their kids. And they want their kids to come down and visit them, but kids only get 2 weeks of vacation, and they don't want to spend 1 week every year going to the same place to go see mom and dad for vacation. And I think that that's probably something we ought to talk about today. How realistic is it for parents to move away from their kids and then expect their kids to spend their vacation time to come visit them when the parents are the one that are on perpetual vacation for the rest of their lives?
Yeah, not very much. And matter of fact, you and I have talked about this on prior podcasts. The thing that people don't remember is that when you move, you take yourself with you and you leave your friends behind.
And family.
That's a truth. You bring yourself with you. So the attitudes, the challenges, the relationship issues, if there are those, whatever it may be, you bring those right along with you, and they just adapt or adopt to a new set of circumstances. Then the fact that you leave your friends behind. And so as you've experienced in the places where you've lived and where you've observed, we see so often people will say, I moved to a new place and I expected to make a whole bunch of friends, but I'm really lonely. Well, making friends, new friends, takes effort, takes intentionality. And so often we're not prepared for that. We think it's going to be, leisure, and everybody's just going to show up and we're going to be arms around the neck buddies for the next, 20 years playing golf, tennis, and having oysters. And it's not that way, because that's not the way life is.
Well, first of all, nobody likes oysters, Bruce. They're disgusting. I mean, come on. Slurping some dead sea animal's body out of its seashell just because you put a little, cocktail sauce on it doesn't make it edible. Sorry. Okay. But how do we get to know our neighbors? I mean, that's true. I mean, I know a lot of our listeners maybe had big houses or had stuff on land and they wanted something smaller and easier, and they need to decide where they're going to move. But when they do decide to move, whether it's into a retirement community or whether it's just into a different neighborhood, how do they get to know their neighbors? I got a couple suggestions. Here's something people don't do very often anymore. Have your neighbors over for dinner. What an incredible idea. People used to do that all the time. And if you're not, maybe you're not a great cook, then have a potluck for multiple neighbors. Somebody's going to have something worthwhile eating, and maybe you're good at buying dessert, or maybe you're good at buying food from someplace really good. But getting to know your neighbors, when you're the new one in the neighborhood, you got to kind of knock on doors. But inviting people over for dinner, everybody likes free food, don't they, Bruce?
And let me give you the flip side of that. In every community, there's a restaurant. Guys go and women go and people go for breakfast. Every community has 1, 2, or 3 of those. So identify where those are, and then ask another couple or a guy, or wife can ask a friend, hey, can I meet you there for breakfast? Because that's where they like to go anyway. Tell you a story. My mother lived in her later years in Sun City West in Arizona. And there was a little restaurant. They're still there, interestingly enough. I found it. Anyways, it was called the Hole in One, and it had a picture of a putting green and, somebody putting. But that's where everybody went. The neighbors went for breakfast. My mom would walk there, and the first, probably month or two that she went there for breakfast, maybe 3 times a week, she'd bring her notebook and she'd make notes. And then she noticed that the same people were there, and she was a pretty creative lady. And so she would identify them by either their past careers or something that would signify to her, not by their real name. So she had the judge, and she had the attorney, and she had the housewife, and she had and so on. Well, finally, she started interacting, and they invited her in, and they would sit at this long table, and just be friends together and meet there for breakfast every morning. And so, finding out where the local people go, and then going there, is the flip side of inviting them over. It's also an environment where you can get to know them and say, "Hey, Joe and I are having dinner Tuesday night." When we're putting a couple steaks on, you want to come over and join us. So it becomes an easy way to be able to connect together.
Yeah, one of the things that Martha and I have done is done neighborhood potlucks, where we just say, because everybody has one thing they love to cook, and everybody in the neighborhood loves it when they do cook that. So we have neighborhood potlucks, and it makes it so it's not such a big effort for everybody on a preparing basis, but you just have to have a place to go meet. This time of year, it's a little rough to do it outside, but you can always find somebody who's got a big enough house that holds some people. But one of the things as believers who are retired, we need to build relationships. Our neighbors, they may never meet Jesus unless they meet him through us, and getting them to know him over a meal is the best way to get a relationship started. There's a lot of things we're going to talk about even more that we could do to interact with our neighbors. We're going to talk about them in our third segment. But coming up, we're going to talk with Amy Ford from Embrace Grace, an organization you can get involved with all across the country at embracegrace.org. We'll be right back with more on I Retire for Him.
Recreating Retirement is an interactive small group study helping you to move from nothing to what's next. You can join us on Wednesdays at 6 p.m. East Coast time on Facebook Live. Our goal for this study is to provide a group setting for interaction and new ideas while leading you through a first step in your journey from retirement to reformation. Here's the big idea. During the next 5 years, 5,000 small groups will experience this journey of discovery in churches and faith-based organizations across the country. Is your church a place where recreating retirement needs to be planted? Join us online to experience the study or prepare to lead a small group at your church or ministry. Email us at contactus@retirementreformation.org or go to our website at retirementreformation.org. That's retirementreformation.org.
Hey, welcome back to I Retire for Him. As today we have, in our second segment of every show, we always have a special guest. And today we have a very special guest coming to us from Dallas, Texas. Amy Ford's here with us today from Embrace Grace. And Bruce, you wanted to make sure we got Amy Ford right here at the beginning of the year. So Happy New Year, Bruce. And why don't you introduce us to Amy Ford and what she's all about?
Happy New Year to you, Jim, and Amy. Welcome to the show. We're so pleased. The whole Christian community is surrounded and encouraged to make a difference in people's lives, and each one of us has a unique call. You've had a unique call on your life that goes back into the 2008, 9, 10, if I remember correctly. And so tell us a little bit how God has nurtured you into the movement and to the ministry that is Embrace Grace.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for having me on. And yeah, I had my own unplanned pregnancy. It's a whole long story and I won't get into it, but basically I almost had an abortion. I grew up in church, went to church every single week. My parents made me go. I didn't have a relationship with the Lord, but I almost had an abortion and I ended up passing out in the abortion room, choosing life at the last minute. And when it wasn't, we tried to go back to church, but it's like the elephant in the room. People don't know whether to say congratulations or I'm sorry. So they don't say anything. And then you feel alone in a crowd of people. And even the pastor wouldn't marry us, because we had sinned. And so there was just a lot of church hurt and all of that. And it wasn't until we had a son, he's amazing. And I ended up marrying the father of the baby. We've been married 26 years. My son is 25, almost 26, and he's awesome. Like, I can't imagine my life without him. But when I look back on that time, I think about how I went to church every single week. And yes, I didn't have a relationship with the Lord, but I still went there. And why did I not feel like the church was a safe place to go to in that situation for prayer, wisdom, guidance, counsel, some kind of help and direction on what to do. And back then we didn't have like Google search engines. We had the phone book, and I know everybody's listening. You probably remember the phone book, and we went straight to the abortion clinic. And so I didn't know that there were pregnancy centers that existed. I didn't know that the church was a safe place to go to. And so I ended up starting Embrace Grace, which is a support group for women with unexpected pregnancies. I just started at my church. Never in a million years did I think God was going to turn it into a nonprofit. That first semester, we had 3 girls come, and one wore a coat in August in Texas because she was terrified of anyone seeing her pregnant and walking into a church. They struggled with shame, all of that. And we just wanted to speak life into them. And over 12 weeks, it was amazing to see the transformation that happened. They were empowered as women to be the moms that God created them to be. So we did it again. 3 more girls came. Then we did it again, 8, then 14, then 21. And it started growing and growing. And then other churches started reaching out saying, hey, this is really cool. Will you show us how to do it too? We want to walk alongside moms with unplanned pregnancies. And then people were like, I want to walk alongside dads that are impacted by unexpected pregnancies. It just kind of started growing organically. And it wasn't until 4 years later that we were like, oh, I think we're supposed to start a nonprofit. Like, let's help the church be the church for these women. And it's God's kindness that leads us to repentance. And so Embrace Grace, the nonprofit, was born.
Kindness that leads to repentance. What a wonderful message. And for our audience, of which probably 80% of them are grandparents, there's an encouragement, there's a word, there's a phrase, there's something they can grasp. That's really good. So give us just a couple of statistics, if you could, on how many churches and how many states, and just an idea, because what we want to do is encourage our audience either to go to your website and then find a place to plug in, or go to your website and find a place to be the plug.
Yeah, for sure. Well, the abortion rate is exactly the same inside the church as it is outside. So many people are like, oh, we don't have pregnant women in our church. And actually, you do have pregnant women. But say you go to the teeniest, tiniest church and there's like 20 people and maybe they're all older and you just actually don't have any pregnant women in your church. Let's change the perspective of looking at this as an outreach. Let's go out into our communities and find these moms and welcome them into the church. Like, it sounds like you could use some younger life, in your church. So changing it to like, it's not just inside the church, but going outside the walls of the church. So we're in over 1,200 churches around the nation. We're in all 50 states that have Embrace Grace support groups. We partner with local pregnancy centers. So when a girl finds out she's pregnant and she's kind of freaking out and scared, those pregnancy centers know about local churches that have Embrace Grace support groups. And a part of Embrace Grace is you get a big baby shower. So those pregnancy centers are referring the moms to the local churches saying, hey, there's a community of believers that want to walk alongside you. You're going to meet other girls going through similar situations, or dads, because we have Embrace Legacy for dads, and men can get involved too, but they can get plugged in. And we hope that, it's not just a 12-week group experience. We want transformation. We want them to get in the habit of going to church, not be nervous about walking into the church. We want them to create community and to find a place of belonging through the church. So, and it's just awesome to see the miracles. There's so many ways to get involved. Anyone can lead a support group, and we make it so easy, plug and play, so easy administratively, so that you have more time relationally with the moms. We've got it all breaking down where like you just press play, the teachings are done for you. We give you the icebreaker questions of how to get them talking. We give you the handouts to hand out to the moms. You can add on your own. If it's a week that's on forgiveness, you have your own story. There's you've been impacted by forgiveness in some way, whether you chose to forgive or someone forgave you. You can add your own flavor, your own teaching to go along with it, but the base of it is all done for you. We teach you how to find the girls through the local pregnancy centers, and you have front row seats to miracles when you lead these support groups. I just finished a group up last night for a 9-week or 12-week session, and all of them were like, we kind of did a recap of how are you feeling? How has it been? What have you gotten out of it? And, one mom said specifically, she's like, there were some times during the last 12 weeks where I realized that that I didn't have anyone and you guys were all I had. And this was the one night of the week that I've been looking forward to. They're at a place of desperation where they want hope. And it's always a good time to talk about Jesus, but there's something about when you're bringing in a new life that it kind of is like makes you reflect on your past decisions. What did you do to get here? And how do I want to move forward in my life? And so having godly wisdom and leaders that are older to speak into the next generation is so important, so vital. I hear sometimes leaders are like, maybe I'm too old, or maybe I'm not I don't seem relevant to their age. But I promise you, what I have realized about this younger generation is they are craving authenticity and they are craving genuine. There's so much in the social media world. You don't know what's fake and what's real, AI, all of that. They crave real. And I believe the older generation is, if we can just stick to who we are, like don't try to dress younger, they crave real, be you and lead a group. They need people speaking life into them. A lot of these moms never had moms and dads of their own. Maybe they did, but they weren't really parented. Not necessarily all, but a lot of them. And so they need a good, godly mentors and people speaking life into them, calling out their giftings and their talents and saying, you can do this. You can have your baby in your dreams too. And we're going to walk alongside you. You don't have to walk alone. It's really a powerful ministry. And it's a really great way to get involved in the movement and be a real help to someone that's walking through an unexpected season like a pregnancy.
Oh, what a great story, Amy. One of the things that we realize is that amongst these 50 million that we talk about, the issue of loneliness and lack of meaning and purpose is viral through that community. And so to find an opportunity to be able to bring your experience, the love that you had for your family to a new family,
yes,
and then to be part of the church blessing the community. Too often our churches are very much ingrown. And so when the outside world looks at what do we do and what do we bring the opportunity to be able to bless the community. And this is certainly a way of doing that. Jim, you had a question?
Well, Amy, I got a lot of questions for you, and I'm wondering if you would hang on and we could carry on a second part of your interview into our next podcast, because I got a couple of big questions I'd love to ask, but we're out of time. Would that be okay?
Yep, I would love to.
You listen to I Retire for Him. We'll be right back.
Our work on this earth doesn't end when the paycheck stops. God calls us to be faithful for a lifetime. Whether you're looking forward to retirement or you're already there, our all-small group study, Recreating Retirement, will help you understand, engage, and activate what God has for you in this fourth quarter of life. Join Retirement Reformation founder Bruce Bruinsma as you consider your past, strengths, spiritual gifts, and your passions, and how they all come together as the call God has for you in these years. Connect with us on our online community group at facebook.com/Retirement Reformation, Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern, or if you'd like to bring Recreating Retirement to your church, email us at contactus@retirementreformation.org. Are you ready to start your life-changing journey today?
Hey, welcome back to I Retire for Him. Great conversation with Amy Ford. Encourage all of you to get involved in Embrace Grace and really the movement of really being pro-woman and pro-child across the country. And we'll be hearing more from Amy in our next podcast as well. Bruce, we're talking about neighboring, and really we're talking about how do we get to know our neighbors. But I wanted to throw something out there. I wrote about it in my book, I Retire for Him. And it was this idea. I see a lot of people, when they retire, they really do need a smaller house because they don't need a 5-bedroom, 4-bath house anymore with a 4-car garage. Well, maybe the garage, but maybe they only need a 2-2 with a 4-car garage. But what I see is when they move, they tend to move into neighborhoods full of old retired people. That's what people did in Florida. It was a nightmare. No kids around, no young people, and people get cranky. Okay, they did in the neighborhoods I lived in Florida. But what my encouragement is, and I wrote about it in my book, was if you're going to move and you got to move into a neighborhood full of young families. Because as the old people in a neighborhood full of young families, first of all, you'll always have help when you need somebody to help lift something. But those young families desperately need chronologically superior people in their lives for the wisdom that they bring, because they don't have access to parents. Some of them are, for many of them, from broken families, that it's an opportunity to start investing in them in so many different ways. And I got a list of things we could do, but how about that for an idea, Bruce? Move into a neighborhood full of young families as somebody who's retired.
No, I think because you bring the uniqueness of your experiences, you bring you can bring a positive attitude about all of life, and you can bring encouragement to a whole category of people, young marrieds and young families that often are pretty discouraged about where they are in life, and they need some encouragement and a model that would be different. But you got to be willing to put yourself out to do that.
Well, it's going to be messy ministry for sure.
Yeah. I mean, you can't just move in and expect, all of a sudden all these people are going to show up. It doesn't work that way.
Well, they're not going to trust you either.
You got to say hi, and you got to be available. And matter of fact, in that environment, one of the things you could do is go to the local elementary school, introduce yourself to the principal, and say, "Hey, what teachers here and what kids here could use some help? I was a math guy. Is there some of your kids that could use some help?" And so, taking the skills and talents that you have and looking for the places where you can apply them is one of the principles of new associations, relationships, and finding meaning.
You know, one of the things that Martha and I realized, we've done a lot of marriage mentoring with younger couples, is that a lot of these younger families, they don't know how to cook. They know how to microwave, but they don't know how to cook. They really don't know how to clean. They don't really know how to raise children. And they really don't know how to fix stuff. Their idea of fixing it is they throw it away and buy something new. And they always need a babysitter because none of them go out on enough date nights. All of those things are things that us as chronologically superior people, we can help with if we move into a neighborhood full of people around us that are younger than us. It's one of those things where people don't realize the practical is what a lot of these young families need. Now, the neighborhoods aren't going to be all peaceful and quiet. And there's going to be dogs barking. And there's going to be kids screaming. And you know what? That's the sound of, amazing. But Bruce, have you ever had the opportunity to pour your life into somebody younger than you and teach them some of that stuff?
Well, when you can and when you do, it's so meaningful. And so everything that we're talking about here is predicated on the attitude that you bring to it. And so I found this, and I don't know who wrote it. It was, anonymous. But I just want to share this with our audience. It's attitude. The longer I live, the more I realize the impact of attitude on life and all the things that we're just talking about here, Jim. Attitude to me is more important than facts. It is more important than the past, than education, than money, than circumstance, than failures or successes, than what other people think or say or do. It is more important than appearance, giftedness, or skill. It will make or break a family, an individual, a company, a church, or a home. The remarkable thing is that we have a choice. Boy, there's a scary word for you. The remarkable thing is that we have a choice, don't we? We have a choice every single day regarding the attitude that will emerge for that day and the people that we interact with. We cannot change our past. We cannot change the fact that people will act in certain ways often that we don't like. We cannot change the inevitable. The only thing we can do is play on the one thing we have, and that is our attitude, and if I may add, our faith. I'm convinced that life is 10% what happens to me and 90% how I react to what is going on around me. And so it is with you. We are in charge of our attitude. And that is so foundational to finding freedom, to being able to make a difference, to be able to find meaning and to have joy in your life rather than having the world shrink on you. We're talking about ways to expand your world rather than have it shrink and come in on you, and then loneliness sets in, and we all know, some of the things that happen, negative things that happen as a result of that. So how, as an 80-year-old, do you find joy? Well, how do you find joy? One of the ways you find joy, and in my own personal experience, is a new experience of being a caregiver for my wife. I never thought about that, frankly. And then I never thought, and if I would have thought about it, I thought, well, I'm not sure that's going to be real joyful. And then I'm in the middle of it, and I'm finding that there are places in the middle of being a caregiver, a whole new experience, that I can find joy. And so then sharing that attitude with those that you come in contact with will bring you in relationship with them, will help you, and will make a difference in your life. And it's a way to extend the 30 years of retirement into a time of joy and the rest of the fruit of the Spirit.
Well, and the greatest way to get rid of any kind of depression or depressed state is to serve others. When you serve others, it takes your mind off yourself. I mean, it's God's solution for depression. Now, some of it's clinical depression. That's different than what I'm talking about. But it is, sometimes we just get depressed. But when you go serve others, it just changes your mindset. Bruce, as we close out this first show talking about neighboring and being, we've given some practical ideas. But one of the things that I did, Martha and I moved into Fort Myers neighborhood in 2019 before we moved to Missouri in 2022. So we had to get to know neighbors fast, and we didn't know it was going to be a short period of time. But what I started doing is I started getting to know my neighbors' names one by one. As I meet them on the street, I'd go quick, write them down so I didn't forget right away. And I'd know which house they lived in. And then I started praying for my neighbors by name. I didn't really know anything other than their first names. Most of them I didn't know their last names. I knew what house they were in, what kind of car they drove, because I love to know what kind of cars people drive. And then when I'd have a further conversation with them, I'd say, hey, I've been praying for you. Is there anything specific I could be praying about? And a lot of times I'd get something. And sometimes I'd have people say, mind your own business. I don't believe in that stuff. That's okay. I say, I still pray for you anyway. That's okay. And a lot of times later on, I'd have an opportunity to pray with people because they knew I was a praying person. When we start to pray with people, it changes our attitude. And we've all had neighbors that didn't bring out the best attitude in us. I don't know, maybe you haven't, Bruce, but I have. The neighbors that have challenged me. When you pray for people, it changes who you are. It just changes how you look at them. And I think that's a good reminder. Bruce, as we close out this first show on neighboring, and we talked about, neighborhood we should move into and how we should do that kind of stuff. What's one thing that you've noticed in your own friends that's been real successful in how they've touched the lives of their neighbors?
Being aggressively and intentionally available. So aggressively and intentionally available. Not only asking, is there anything I can do for you? Which is often just a throwaway statement, but noticing something that can be done. And I will close with this example. I have a fairly good-sized yard, got a bunch of trees, and apparently a big limb fell down on the far end of the lot that I hadn't noticed. And I got a text from a friend of mine who said, I don't know, Bruce, did you notice that the big limb came down in your yard? Would it be okay if I came over and cut it up and took it away for you?
And you're like, no, I like it sitting there.
No, I like it sitting there, and I want to do that myself. I mean, what a blessing. What a blessing. It was aggressive, kind, intentional, took effort on his part, and I was totally oblivious of the need until he brought it to me. What a wonderful way to create a relationship with someone on his part, and then my choosing how I respond in thanks to him.
It's tough, especially when you're used to doing stuff on your own. It's tough to say, yeah, I could use help, but it is a gift to other people when you let them help you. Great conversation, just great conversation about neighboring. We encourage you to listen to the next podcast where we'll finish up this conversation, and also check out resources. Talk about Bruce's books, resources. He's got 6 books out there, always working on another one. about living with intentionality in retirement. And of course, I've got the book that I wrote along with my father-in-law called I Retire for Him. All of our books are aimed at just giving you practical advice on living out your faith in retirement. You've been listening to I Retire for Him, with the voice and resource of Retirement Reformation, with your host, Jim Brangenberg, and Retirement Reformation's very own founder, Bruce Brynsma. We're Christ followers journeying from retirement to reformation, so we can ultimately say, I retire for Him.
I retire for Him.
Thanks for listening to I Retire for Him, with your hosts Jim and Martha Brangenberg and Retirement Reformation founder Bruce Brynsma. I Retire for Him is the mouthpiece of the Retirement Reformation. Most Christians tend to follow the world's pattern of rest and self-pampering during retirement. However, in your retirement, you can be focused on God's unique call to love, serve, and help others. This can be your best season of life if you take advantage of a life's worth of knowledge and experience and combine it with a greater freedom of time and money and invest it all in the generations both preceding and following you. The Retirement Reformation is encouraging Christians to find and follow God's call in all seasons and aspects of life, especially in retirement. Take time to sign the manifesto at retirementreformation.org and explore the wealth of resources available on our site. Join this movement of God and journey from retirement to reformation so you can say, I retire for Him. Go to retirementreformation.org.